Simon Ramshaw here, Managing Director of Erchonia Lasers Limited in the UK, or it might be good afternoon for our US attendees. So thanks very much for joining. If you're in the East Coast of the US, you might have had some very stormy weather today. So pleased you were able to make it on. We have quite a bit in the northeast of England as well. So if there are any forms of electric shortages or anything like that, whether it's Dr. Jerome's side or ours, please forgive us. So before I start going through Dr. Jerome Rerucha's fantastic experience that he's developed over the years, welcome, Dr. Jerome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me, and welcome everybody.
Thank you. Now, those of you who join us on a regular basis may have seen Dr. Jerome Rerucha when he came across at short notice, I may add, to help us out at a seminar and workshop that we did in Windsor back in May, and that will always be greatly appreciated. Now, I know we owed a lot to the fact he always wanted to come to the UK because he'd never been. Hopefully, if the opportunity arises again, he won't be put off.
I had an amazing trip. I can honestly say I've been doing this for 26 years, traveling, and I've probably done a total of pushing 650 seminars, and not just saying it to say it, but it had to do with the event, everybody there, and of course, Simon and his hospitality, he and Kate. It was my favorite trip I've had in 26 years. So it won't be hard to get me to come back.
Well, we greatly appreciate that and can't wait for you to come back as well. So, okay, without further ado, I think some of the UK guys will probably want to get across out for their dinner later on. I'll just give everybody who's not aware of you a little bit of a remit as to what your experience is and where it belongs. So Jerome is a practicing clinician, owner of Performance Chiropractic and Wellness and Brain Body Fit clinical performance systems with his wife Jeanette. Dr. Jerome teaches integration of advanced examination and corrective solutions, including non-thermal high energy low level laser, vestibular spinners, metabolism and nutrition, healthy weight loss, muscle gain, functional lab testing, adjusting methods, mental, emotional release, integrated with the entire triad of health. More recent educational resources are online subscription, Performance Practic TV. So if you think Netflix for healers, that's pretty much what it is. And the Brain Body Fit podcast. Prior to clinical practice, he was a full-time strength coach, competing. And if you see him, you'll be able to see his frame actually from this statement. But he competed in powerlifting for 14 years and won a lifetime drug-free world title and the Best Lifter Award in 1999. And having a personal competitive lifting experience, coaching numerous types of athletes and working with elite strength athletes provides additional benefits when teaching his dynamic clinical applications for clinical practice and providing clinical exercise for brain and body enhancement, practical for clinical practice rather than traditional rehab methods. More information, if anybody wants to see exactly what Dr. Jerome does behind the scenes, we can send you the link. But if you do have a pen and paper or a phone handy, if you go to www.performancepractic.com. So www.performancepractic.com, and you'll see everything that Dr. Jerome does. And he's one of the pioneers in this industry, especially when Erchonia started in the US with their numerous US FDA market clearances. Dr. Jerome participated in a lot of them and was one of the key practitioners on the front end that helped them build their educational and training infrastructure. So Erchonia owe him a lot, as do we. So messages to the right, guys, you'll see just at the top, depending whether you're using Windows or Apple, a chat bot section. Now, Dr. Jerome would prefer the questions at the end. So please type away, or those of you who've got my WhatsApp number, please just send me WhatsApp messages and I will collate the questions and ask him in the end. So without further ado, Jerome, the platform is now yours.
Thank you, Simon. And I look forward to getting started with this. I was talking to Simon before as he made a little bit of a note. We did have some storms in the area. It's completely clear right now. But even earlier today, the electricity can flicker on this end, which completely knocks me off of this webinar. So if that happens, I will be back. It may take me 3 minutes, 4 minutes to get back on, as the router has to reboot and all that. But at that time, in case that happens, don't think, oh, it's over, especially if it's 10 to 20 minutes into the webinar. I will be back, and you guys could maybe start asking questions, even though I would like them at the end. So a lot of you already know a lot about Erchonia lasers and the uniqueness of high energy, non-thermal, and all of that holds true here. So I'm not going to go over a lot of the basics. We do want to kind of work into, and at some point, something new that we are working on here is these motorized vestibular spinners. And some versions have existed already. I know clinicians that have like these really incredible versions that are $250,000, and that's really not practical for most people. And even with those, it's amazing how many things you cannot do with the $250,000 spinner as you can with the ones that you kind of see in this picture. So we're going to kind of touch base onto that. But prior to that, we're going to work our way into and also show you how to work with the vestibular system that's more clinically traditional when you don't have motorized spinners. So that's what I did for 25 years. And as Simon mentioned, I was a full-time strength coach before I was a chiropractor. And so that has given me such a superpower still to help people and heal and create tissue regeneration, whether it's from an organ health perspective, neuromusculoskeletal perspective. That has been a huge advantage. But of course, what we get to learn as clinicians that they don't teach the strength and fitness professionals, there again, that is a superpower in itself, but putting them together. So one of the things that inspired these motorized spinners, these have been used maybe not quite 10 years, but figure skaters have some of the most amazing vestibular systems where commonly at the end of the routine, especially at national level, Olympic levels, I call it the human tornado, where at the end of the routine, they're just a blur, they're spinning so fast, and then they stop, and they're not dizzy for 1/100th of a second. And some of those people at that level, they spin over 300 revolutions a minute. Now think about that. And so it is incredible. You don't just by chance do that, and you don't get to have that significant of a vestibular system just from skating. And of course, ballet, these things have been used commonly with them, and the market is just untapped, but it's really untapped for clinicians, because I like taking anything that builds the most amazing superhuman people on the planet, but how can I scale it down in order to be practical at a clinic? And especially if it's practical in a clinic and we can use lasers, that's a home run. And so as we're just going to talk about, I take a very system approach no matter what. I take very detailed histories. I'm a system practitioner, not a symptopractor, as far as only chase symptoms. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you can use your laser. My elbow hurts, laser the elbow. I have plantar fasciitis, laser the area of involvement or symptom. Nothing wrong with that. You're going to get results. However, you will also note that a lot of times if you go to the nerve root, not where the symptom is, even times people you laser the low back and their knee gets better or their plantar fasciitis gets better, and you didn't even laser the knee or the foot. And that's just because of the nerve roots that go to that area. And of course, this even goes up into the brain. There's a lot of people in the United States that even have brain-based practices where that's it. That's all they do. They laser brains all day, every day. They have significant high volume practices. That's not how I practice, but I'm aware of those people. The brain is a very big deal to me, even though I would never say I have a brain-based practice for those who do. I think that's great, but it also just allows us to understand how diverse lasers are, especially when you're using Erchonia lasers and everything you have access to. So all sorts of things here. I always tell people there's 12 traditional systems of the body, and all 35,000 symptoms and diseases are because one or more of those 12 systems are out of balance. but there really is more systems than just this. But you can't leave out the meridian system or the fascial system. These things are very well documented, and the fascial system is immensely huge as far as what it integrates in the body and the neuroreceptors in it. So all of you are aware of that. So once we even get past the systems of the body, and there's more than even the 14 that I shared there, but they're not traditionally taught in medical textbooks. However, if you do go into PPTV, it was always like, then there's super systems. It's like, how can we integrate the body and sympathetic, parasympathetic, as much as that's part of the nervous system, specifically with sympathetic, parasympathetic, like think of the far-reaching health benefits to that, you know, is in terms of the fight or flight, as well as the feed and breed system, the rest and regeneration system of the parasympathetics. And there's a lot of talk of vagus nerve all the time. The vagus nerve is just a part of the parasympathetic. It's a big, important part, but it's just a part of it. So sometimes I just want to make sure, even with some of the newer speakers, that you know, it's not that separate. You know, we're all going after these big chunks. And you know, me being a strength coach, you really look at making maximum improvements in people, being very specific, but you're looking for these global changes, these brain body changes, and reaching levels that you can compete against in the world if you so choose to. Then, of course, brain balance. Now, everyone on here is probably aware of those. There's lots of different ways to do these things, whether you're a muscle tester, you're not a muscle tester. There's insights into how to be effective with the lasers and all those. Obviously, there's a gut-brain connection. These are huge super systems in the body. And then the body wants to move. Neuromechanobiology is a big deal. And we are a cross-crawl neural inhibition machine. So we love walking, swinging the arms, even doing more intense type of activities than on three-dimensional surfaces. But the body, all the way from infancy and development, cross crawl is a big deal, and that doesn't change. And even in PPTV, if you currently don't know how to, you know, reset gait from like an applied kinesiology standpoint, you know, we go into that in great detail if you're interested in that, by putting people in certain positions, and certain muscles should be strong in certain positions, certain muscles should be weak in certain positions. And if those patterns are off, lasers are just one of many amazing things that can be done in order to upregulate the body and restore those patterns, whether it's sympathetic, parasympathetic patterns, brain balance patterns, gut-brain connections, the actual physical gait cross crawl, and of course the neurological metabolism that the ATP outcome, you know, helps under all circumstances, all those physiological aspects. Now, the vestibular system is part of the nervous system, but it is amazing how big and influential the vestibular system is. And for those of you who have heard me lecture for years, I've always taught that grip is the last thing to go in the body. And it's true. And if you look in PubMed, there's over 40,000 research papers that pertain specifically to health based upon grip strength. And in most cases, if you're just going to play statistics, the person with the strongest grip lives the longest. And there's nothing magical about just a strong grip. They never talk about this, but the reality of why that is, well, number one, I always knew that before I looked into PubMed, because as a strength athlete, your legs are going to go, I mean, you're just not going to be the physically strongest you've ever been in your entire life. If you're competing in Olympic lifting or powerlifting or strongman or strong woman, you know, you'll probably hang in there till you're 40, and you can have, you know, amazing peak strength. Some people only make it to 33 or so. But grip strength, you could be 65 years old and you've got the strongest grip you've ever had. So people, when they are world-class strength athletes and they can no longer compete in the open world-class events, they still easily have 20 to 30 years of just doing grip competitions, which is a global phenomenon. And even at age 65, you get those guys that compete with the 400-pound genetic freak shaved gorillas at age 28, age 32. And even if they lose, they don't lose by much. So grip is the last thing to go from a physical performance standpoint. But the vestibular system is the first thing to go. And if you don't even develop it, like in youth, there's such an advantage to kids who do gymnastics, do dance, do cheerleading, do these body weight vestibular aspects. Ballet is amazing, figure skating, diving. It is so amazing. And even more so, it's great. Played football and soccer and a lot of other sports out there, but some of those really require a much higher vestibular system. However, we can bring this into the clinic, and there is so much information out there, and so it is exciting. We live in the technology age, we live in the information age. Our clinic and the services that we respond should look like that graph that we have. Obviously, we're not going to have time to go into the detail, and I probably don't need to because many of you have heard all of this already. But the point is, it doesn't change. Different wavelengths have different energy outputs. You guys have been taught that. Ultimately, we're looking at making ATP through the mitochondria. And that is just so universal that every single cell in the body has mitochondria, which requires ATP energy, except mature red blood cells right before they recirculate. They don't have mitochondria anymore as they're going through that recycling process. But other than that, that's why Erchonia lasers are just so universal. And as we get into this, we're going to start with where everybody knows that when you do mention the vestibular system to most people, clinicians or not clinicians, they think of balance and they think of the little ear canals, and none of this is wrong, but this goes so far beyond this if you're not aware of it. And even PubMed is a great source for getting clinical information, but we are going to pull in the hands-on application of scaling it down with these super athletes on the planet, how they train their vestibular systems. So no secret here, you guys already know all this. Vestibular system imbalance, and a lot of people are always concerned about seniors falling. But long before seniors start falling or they become, those predisposed to these things, I promise if the kids were not in gymnastics or some of those sports, they have an incredibly down-regulated vestibular system. And even when it was fun and we tumbled a lot, and when we were little kids, and we like tumbling forwards and backwards and doing cartwheels and spinning in circles and tilt-a-whirls and all sorts of things, and it was fun, kind of feeling a little bit of wooziness and butterflies in the stomach. But then all of a sudden you get to age 25 or so, and you can't do 20% of what you did as a little kid, even if you weren't in gymnastics or figure skating. So the vestibular system is the first thing to go. In some people, it doesn't develop very well because they were never very active to develop it. But the other thing, when you have proper tools, you can increase the efficiency of the vestibular system hundreds of percent. And that is no exaggeration. You may not be able to increase the function hundreds of percent from doing the typical clinical only vestibular challenges like finger nose, dysdiadokinesia, all sorts of eye movements and things. All those are valuable, and I still want people to do those as we're looking at eyes and ears and even some posture things and how that can affect your vestibular system. We've done that for a long time, but we now can start bridging that gap to where total next level vestibular training with motorized spitters, and you don't have to spend 250,000. There's other ones out there that are 85 to 120,000. They have some diagnostic capabilities of that, but still, figure skaters don't use those. And the super athletes on the planet, it is incredible how you can use that treatment aspect, especially with a laser, and really upregulate people. So the brain's a big deal. And just to review, you can take your handheld lasers and you could laser just each lobe of the brain 60 seconds, even going up to 2 minutes is not too much. That's something super helpful that has been taught here in the States. Dan Murphy was the first one to do that, and it's held true ever since. When there was absolutely nothing about low-level laser therapy and lasering the brain in PubMed or research studies, Dr. Murphy had brought that use to the table 10 years before it started getting a lot of research. And now, oh my gosh, like what has been proven, the effectiveness of that. But when we start looking at activating the body, and lasers are great, point and shoot lasers are great. You're going to help a lot of people. But when you can activate the body and use lasers, that's a whole nother game changer as far as how to increase the efficiency of the laser therapy you're doing, as well as even increasing the efficiency of the stimulus or activation that you're doing, especially if the person has an injury. And so that's where we clinicians come in, where people get stuck and even normal healing doesn't occur. And it's so game changing when people find a laser practitioner, no matter what your licensure is. But then, of course, different licensures do different things. And then the uniqueness of each person and how they may activate the laser. There's also different variables, even if we were all using the exact same laser. So just kind of run through kind of the broad base of this. We're still in the brain, but the vestibular system, whether you reset the typical cranial nerves, the cranial the eye resets, or the ear resets, we'll kind of get into that. But that's fantastic for concussion. Just point and shoot laser, whether you're under the FX or the handhelds, that alone has huge value. We talk about the vestibular system balancing more than just the body. And as we just look at the little highlighted part in the body, in addition to body balance, the vestibular cortical network contributes to modulate space, body, and self-awareness. Really think athleticism, hand-eye coordination, with a lot of different things, even to get groceries pain-free or independence of activities of daily living, you still need to be self-aware of space and modulate space. However, you are greatly slowed and reduced, down-regulated just for independence of activities of daily living versus the coordination it takes to be an athlete, especially some of these vestibular athletes, as I call them. Emerging evidence suggests that the vestibular network expands into dimensions of emotional processing, mental health, social cognition, the importance of connecting vestibular physiology, affective neuroscience, and social neuroscience. So this is where even Simon mentioned, and I'm a very triad of health person. So I do a lot of emotional release techniques. I do metabolism, whether you want to get on stage, whether you want to hit a weight class in MMA fighting or wrestling, we do the super healthy weight cuts to where people are metabolically superior when they go into competition, put on muscle, lean out, all these different things. We do a lot with nutrition. And then of course, structure. I am a chiropractor and I'm a formal strength coach. So, we really obsess also on the detail of posture, but not just ideal neutral, but how movement and how all these things work together. And the vestibular system is a monster for pulling it all together. So when we look at how the more developed your vestibular system is, it's going to completely set the tone for everything physical and how your body responds and lives in gravity and how it relates to itself in space. It is really amazing how the vestibular system ties directly into motivational center, the limbic system, the mood center. Does it mean you're not going to have problems or people can't have depression, even if they are an Olympic level gymnast and or any of these things we're talking about, but their thresholds are so much higher. Number one, those people are under a lot of stress. Still, bad things can happen to good people. But for so many people, and then we're going to learn from the metabolic standpoint just how significant the vestibular system is to raising the bar to the overall health and wellness, including metabolic aspects. And I don't know if it's the most important thing. I mean, it is. Heart disease is the #1 killer in the world, but there is so much research on the direct influence of the vestibular system to the heart and cardiovascular system. So kind of gives you an idea. The vestibular system is epic. And in my opinion, you cannot train it enough or become superior enough, especially when you do all these other important things that we do as clinicians, not just what the coaches do for young developing athletes, but in order to combine this with proper nutrition balancing, with structural balancing, and all these great things you guys are already doing. So Absolutely. This has been known for a long time. Even kids with learning disabilities, if you just put them at the most basic of basic tumbling classes and people get that motor development and let kids crawl around and play and sometimes more organized than others, kids, they get smarter. IQs go up, brain development. Even if you were slow and behind, absolutely. If you train motor skills, especially very deliberate motor skills, you go into the discipline of ballet, which is even way harder than cheerleading, dance, and gymnastics of what's required, even though, yes, gymnastics is very hard when you get going, without a doubt. But we're talking vestibular system there. And the people that train in those sports, or even if they don't do it competitively, they just do it, they're always the above average students in school. There's discipline that relates to it, but it's also motor and cognition development. And this has been known for decades, decades, and decades. So obviously we get into some very significant, medical conditions that PubMed talks about is the vestibular system and depression, vestibular system, dementia, memory. And you can get as specific as you want if you really love deep diving into the big words, into the neuro programs. I'm all for that. But it also is, even if you didn't know any of those things, like to have the skill to be able to train people of what some of these coaches are doing, only make it appropriate for the person in a clinic. This has so much to do with everything, and it's not a secret. Vestibular system, and we look down Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, hippocampus, memory, striatum, vestibular system, dementia. It is so directly linked, and we always want to get to people earlier to where they don't even get these neurodegenerative diagnoses, but a lot of people wait too long. A lot of clinicians, patients don't walk in and until they have full-blown diagnoses. But hopefully some of you that are more preventative type of practitioners, you realize that even when people are 20, 25, 30, 35, and their balance sucks, you put them on even just a simple motorized spinner at a very low level, it's incredible how bad people's vestibular systems are. And don't just dismiss that. Like, we could really improve that and really change people's lives midterm, long term, down the road, not to mention getting amazing benefits. As their vestibular health improves, everything generally improves. But this is, we want to add and keep the great work you guys are already doing. So much here to share. You guys can just go into PubMed and find these things, and even the facts of how the vestibular system and cardiovascular system, whether you're looking at heart rate, heart rhythm. And again, this starts taking us directly into the vagus nerve. So when we start looking at heart rate variability, health and cognition, it is all directly tied to a massive direct conduit system of the vestibular system. And even as finite as this is, like, if you do put regular training, even at low intensity, but just consistency, as if you were training, to be an athlete again, you can take anybody at any age because their vestibular system is so low, you can improve it hundreds of percents. And so here again, just did the research. So they talk about the heart and brain connect via both electrical and hemodynamic interactions. They talk about, the AV node, the SA node, all those things that you do, epinephrine and norepinephrine, but how it is directly related through the vestibular system and how the vagal tone. And that's what's just so neat about this, is that integration in the body to where you don't have to make this complicated and you can make really big changes. And then, of course, stay within your method of how you practice already, how you already do with the particular types of treatments you already do. You could just stay right there. And some of you may be aware already. So out of any clinical textbook out there, and if you listen to the neurodiplomate teachers speak, eyes and ears, called central integration, is a very big deal. And this definitely starts tying in. I'm not the only person talking about the vestibular system. It's been a big deal in the first generation of us speakers. 26 years ago, we're spinning people in office chairs and resetting cranial nerves with the eyes, resetting the ears, and that doesn't change. So if you're not aware of this, some of you may be muscle testers like applied kinesiology. If you are, that's great. You know, you'll find these things very conclusively. It's great showmanship to the patients. If you're not a muscle tester, that doesn't mean you can't use these things. If you start getting into the neuro program, you'll really start looking at very subtleties when you have people do very methodical eye movements, like not fast, not slow. Just think of the grace of like a grandfather clock pendulum. And you want them very purposeful. You don't want people to assume and jump ahead, but different directions you move your eyes relate to different cranial nerves. And this is a fantastic thing to reset with a laser. Lasers are amazing in order to reset these. I mean, in chiropractic school, especially in the States, like when you're going through chiropractic school, you don't know why you're learning this. Well, it had nothing to do with what I'm teaching you anyway. But we had to learn cranial nerves for national boards. Like we got big in-depth tests on these things at least 10 times throughout a 3.5-year professional school. And, you know, they never gave you a way to fix them. It was just you refer, you know, that type of deal. And you had to look for them because of state boards and national boards and those types of things. But we had to study these, and there was no treatment and no solution if you did find something positive. So I really kind of disregarded all of that information. But then as soon as I got out of school, that was when Erchonia was just getting out of the garage, basically. And then we found these lasers, and I was already into AK. I grew up under an applied kinesiology practitioner. But this is one of the first things that jumped into our minds of like, remember how worthless testing cranial nerves was when we were in school? But now we could take a laser and actually affect these things. And again, we were muscle testers. But even if you're not a muscle tester and you're not a neurodiplomate to where you're looking for the super subtle exam and eye twitch differences, this is just a great exercise in terms of just purposeful movements. You can take the lasers, the handheld lasers or the FX, you know, you can do any conglomeration that you want, but at the minimum, you could just take a laser, you can put it in the stand, and you could position it to where it's just positioned to be on the brain stem, because that's where a lot of these very life enhancing processes are. So I'm not going to take the time to align it, but you can have people just do very purposeful motions, and you, even the clinician, can just have them follow your finger, not super slow, definitely not fast, just keep it moving. And you'll see all sorts of things. Like even if you film these, you'll see the eyes twitch all the time. And as you laser, even if they did have a head injury, it's not uncommon at all that you will really start seeing corrections through this. Many times just on the first visit. Other times it may just take a few treatments, but it's pretty profound. It's always neat to do those types of things if the significant other and spouse is in the room, because it'll change right in front of their eyes, and even they'll see it. Another thing with the ears, so the vestibular is in the ear. Now, a long time ago, before there was even laptop computers with like GarageBand on it and all sorts of stuff, so we used medical tuning forks. And I don't think you need to buy medical tuning forks. These things were ridiculously expensive. I probably wouldn't buy them today. But there's still some advantages if you do have these, or probably go to a music store, and they're probably a lot cheaper there. But here again, laser, you can either laser directly into the ear, you can muscle test and identify things that aren't working, but this is a great way in order, if people do have balance issues, concussions, heads, to drive these pathways while we're using lasers. And these are unique frequencies themselves, the different tones. And so as you could hit these, there's a tone, and we definitely could be lasering the ear while the vibration of the tuning fork is going in, or we could be lasering the brain stem, because so many cranial nerves, they go right into there. The other neat thing about tuning forks, like everything with sound, you literally could like pull up the piano on GarageBand and just hit different notes, whether you muscle test people or not, or just to drive pathways. You could do that today's day and age. But the main reason I would get tuning forks is it is pretty neat that you can hit this so that you could put this on the temporal lobe. So not only you're getting the auditory message, but you're also getting the vibration message and frequency while you're lasering. So these are things we've done for 26 years. And I don't want to take that away from you guys now, that you can do that or modifications of that. Any laser you use, you know, we have our FX here off to the side, you know, not knowing if we'll get to it, but all of these are just so advantageous for treating and how we run our clinics. But we are going to kind of get into these spinners. And so there's no way to mount lasers directly on the spinners here, but it does work very good to where spinners work all by themselves. So as we've seen how these things are used in athletes, I mean, there's just some consistency. It's kind of fun. All sorts of different body postures you try to do on these things as we'll introduce, but they are so practical for a clinic setting. And so first we're going to always introduce, like I want to do with my patients, I always like to show them what a healthy nervous system looks like. And here's just a young girl, and here's traditionally how figure skaters and ballet people, they train their vestibular system. And she's considered relatively novice doing this, but she did a good job. And that's exactly how they would do. And, you know, they go different directions, all sorts of reps and sets, and you could really get people, they're spinning at a ridiculous fast level above and beyond even what she did. Another young girl, she's not holding on with her hands. She just has her hands up there. She actually has a harness. They're called suspension harnesses on her. They're very, very comfortable. But this, again, this is very typical how they train the vestibular system. They kind of superseded and how the body works on thresholds. And this is definitely, you still have to skate to be a good skater. But these motorized spinners and the suspension harnesses definitely took people to a whole new level. Like your kid could, unless they're just a prodigy and just a freak of nature, that most people, they could never compete in today's day and age at any level without having a motorized spinner if you're into figure skating and ballet, because everybody has these for quite a while in terms of how you can train at home and do all sorts of things. And they were really good about doing different creative things. So I really love some of the common sense and simple things. And it is unlimited, the practical applications. And this is how these things were just commonly used, not used in the clinic world at all, just used in the athlete world. And these aren't just for little kids, but you know, up to this point, that's going to change here very, very rapidly. But these things have been used primarily in skating, ballet. It's just a main staple in those types of things. Of course, now we're going to be introducing these things to gymnastics, dance, and cheerleading here in the United States. And of course, this will be amazing for anybody in terms of even football players, receivers, especially MMA, boxers, fighters, anything with hand-eye coordination in terms of exercising that vestibular system. So you can kind of start getting some ideas. I wanted to show you what a relatively healthy nervous system was. And this is going to be what the common person walking down the street necessarily will be. So this was at a private strength and conditioning seminar we were at in the United States. So this guy is a strength coach, super great guy and a friend of mine. However, so as he's not even spinning very fast, now I'm looking at this going, this is way beyond him. Now you might not be able to tell right now, but he is completely knocked out at this point. He is not even conscious. Nobody else knows it. And I'm sitting in the back going, and timber. So he is completely out. That's how weak his vestibular system is. And I'm not here to sell fear to people, but he is not going to have a very good outcome. I can guarantee the symptoms, the medication he's on already, as well as what's coming in his near future, it's not only because he's got a weak vestibular system, but that was a pathetic vestibular system, and his entire health and well-being is going to be compromised by that in a very linear progression. So these are some types of things. If I would have been a little bit more conservative in my office, even though I'm a very aggressive practitioner, those people were not clinicians there. And as I'm watching that, I'm just like, woof, they have a lot of value what they do. They're the ones that are able to make the best of the best because they're used to working on healthy people, but they really didn't have any idea, the general public that is just moving around like nobody else, everybody else, how bad their vestibular system is. So there is so many conservative things that we can do, and I just want to give you an idea. So we scaled these in order to be modified for the clinic. So as you saw, the skater, you know, the young athletes, they don't use a balance bar. They just keep working on it. And they just tumble off of it. It's just kind of fun when they lose their balance. But as we're looking into the clinic, you know, these are some types of things. You can just spin in circles, just standing on it. But some of these body positions, you can make this go faster. This doesn't go near as fast as the athlete spinners do. It goes significantly faster than this. And you don't have to change body positions so fast. But this just kind of gives you an idea of the different variables and whether he does one single position for 10 seconds or 20 seconds or a minute's not very far. It's easy to switch and go back. It's very smooth, but there's just so many different body positions. And again, you are building nerve synapses, especially when you're not good at this, just being consistent. But you are going to also find out this type of challenge, this is different than just spinning in a chair like I'm sitting in now. That's what we did for a long time. But even though you're kind of activating the body, it's still, when you start using a motorized spinner and your body is not making it spin, your body is responding to this spin. It does feel unique, but especially how we can align lasers and start upregulating the body, whether we start these things, you know, from a little ways away, just so they don't impair us. We're putting laser energy into the body as we're activating these pathways. Even if we change different body positions, it has really been amazing in the clinic. And again, spinner training's been around, and none of these people before meeting me had ever heard of lasers and how they work these things, but they still use them to make the super athletes. Obviously, people do get concussions, and when they do get head injuries and concussions, obviously their performance drops a ton. But they also know by using these vestibular spinners appropriately that people heal from concussions so much faster. Not just because they have a memory of those things, but because even if you weren't an athlete and you started appropriately and gently firing the vestibular system to where it challenges the nervous system. Make no mistake, we don't want people throwing up, but here's a particular doctor, and this is about a 5-minute testimonial. I'm not saying I'm going to play the whole thing. I want to be courteous of your time and take questions, but as we do see some of these things, there is a difference between what people have done in the past, and this guy's been a long-term laser owner and done everything I shared with you already.
30 years. I was involved in a car accident where I was sitting at a stoplight and I got hit from behind by a truck really hard. And that was a little over 4 years ago. And since that time, I've had good chiropractic, laser therapy, oxygen therapy, vibe plate. I've done everything. And I still would notice when I was in what happens most often, like walking to my car in a parking lot, at some point, in spite of training my balance on a vibe plate and just standing, something about being in motion, I would just kind of feel, uneasy, like I was going to fall over, and I wouldn't really do it, but it was just unsettling because I hadn't experienced that in my life. So there were some things with my accident that, in spite of years and lots of quality therapy, I that just weren't resolved, even though I settled. And so when I came, I was interested in trying the spinner, but when I got on there, I was nervous to do it in front of people because I knew that I've tried to do some spinning on my own, just like spinning around in a circle is part of a like ancient rite to build your energy. And I knew that, well, I could go two or three, I could go a number of times, but I would get really dizzy. So I was careful. I hung on tight to the grip handles, and you know, just a couple, 3 times and going slow, and it's like, whoa, I'm gonna fall off this thing. But I just, okay, I'm gonna reverse it. I kept playing with it, and I at some point it just started to be where I want to go faster. And so I wanted to try to do some of the things we learned in the seminar, where like I would like stand on one leg, raise a knee up, and what happened is I mean, I couldn't lift my leg, like it was like glued to the spinner, and I'd really work at it and almost lift it off the ground. But then I just started making these improvements just there in the seminar, you know, with I just kept going back and forth and going faster and trying different things. And it was like my brain, it was like turning my brain on, and I started feeling good, and I wanted to, you know, like I was getting a drink of water, and I was dying of thirst. I just wanted more and more. And it affected my mood. It affected my ability. Like I wanted to talk with people and engage, whereas more of an introvert. And I felt dramatic improvements. It's like, I got to start doing this a lot more, because this is like the difference. This is what I need to actually fully recover and kind of get my life back. Some things I've done just prior to attending the seminar, I'd been doing some ancient Tibetan rites, and one of them, it's to build energy, and it's spinning clockwise in a circle, and they say to increase 1 a day. And I had tried that, and I'd gotten up to about 12, and of course when I would get out of balance, or, you know, I would check myself when I was done, and I would laser my brain, you know, or cerebellum or cranial nerves, wherever was indicated, and reset it. But I continued to be, you know, quite, you know, I could do, you know, 9, 10, 12, but I was really, you know, really wobbly and almost going to fall over. And then I had also tried to use a chair and, you know, spin myself, you know, both directions. Of course, you have to use your arms or legs or something to get yourself moving. And again, there I would figure out what was where I was going out of balance, and I would laser myself if I needed to and reset it. But I still, you know, was very limited. And I noticed a more profound difference. There's something different about using the spinner and just letting my body concentrate on the spinning part instead of all the active part of making it happen myself. And I could go faster and stimulate my system more the way it needed to be stimulated. So that's why I think that the spinner at the seminar was much more.
Yeah, so just kind of sharing that as we're kind of on the close here, that let me come in here where I could come back to seeing myself. And then we also have a chair that's over here too, and this will be pretty exciting for people. Even people more compromised where they can't do the balance bar version, and literally how we could put people in this chair and how we can go forwards, backwards, just easy to do these things, but we can also complex it. So, you know, we can put lasers in stands. I got my FX over here. I know we're going to take questions here very, very soon, but it's really unlimited, all the different variables you can do with these, to where if you're familiar with like exercise classes for seniors and like all the little complex things that they have people do exercises in the class, you could like squeeze your knees on a ball, you could put bands around, you can do grip trading, you can do dexterity balls. Like there are so many things, there's so many neural games, either on a tablet or a cell phone, that already are out there for brain exercise games. And you do that while you spid, your score will go down, how it complexes your body. So there's so many ways to exercise the vestibular system. And especially for laser practitioners, this has been really exciting for us to do it. The motorized spinners have given us an advantage compared to what I was doing for 26 years. And there's nothing wrong with doing the clinical things. I still reset cranial nerves, eyes, ears. We still do simple things of having people stand on one leg and have them walk straight lines. And all those types of things are still valuable. But there's no doubt when we start getting into that world of performance and how can we bring what builds the super healthiest people in the world, decrease that intensity to where it's even applicable to people with, you know, significant traumas and neurological deficiencies, or if you don't want to get those things, constantly put equity into your health. And it is pretty remarkable. Even myself, take phone calls, talk to people all over, give them clinical support, and I don't sit in a chair anymore and do it. So I'll get on the balance bar and I try standing on one leg, and as I'm spinning, nobody can even tell I'm doing it, but it's been a lot better use of time and being productive. But all of us could epically improve our vestibular system. And even on the standing ones, you know, I love it because your feet are in gravity. It really is toes to nose. And just think of all the different body postures. You're like a music box dancer on there as far as just different positions holding it. It is so humbling and fascinating to watch high national level, let alone international figure skaters on these things. I mean, it is ridiculous how fast they go, and they're in these distorted, contorted body positions. And it's beyond impressive what the human body is capable of doing. So we can start taking questions.
Sorry, Jerome. I think I was having some connectivity issues there. I am here. It wouldn't work. Right, we have a couple through. Oh, this one, actually, it's just somebody making a statement. High-level solo figure skaters are usually retired from competition by the age of 20 to 25.
That's not my experience, but not saying there. So, I mean, if you fall on the ice, you know, that's the part of it too. But, you know, people do have injuries, but I know people that are still skating far into their years, or, you know, that's what all of us want to do. We want to learn from each other and take the good. And like I said, you could have people in wheelchairs. If you're strong enough to lift them up and put them in that chair, they're going to get added benefits.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, these questions have come as we're going through, so you may have already answered them. In your clinical experience, what tends to change first when the brain and body begin to reintegrate properly?
You know, people come in for so many wide variety of things, and you know, we don't just use this for people with back pain. You know, if they're coming to that, we've had a lot of success doing other things, but we want to introduce this to people. Every single person, our goal is to, no matter what they come in for, we kind of meet their needs. We have a system approach to them. We always take detailed histories to where they learn beyond the priority they initially started with, that there's other things we can help them with at the same time as we make their whole system stronger. And by introducing a vestibular system And, you know, we do always the first couple sessions, and you could do it any way you want, that they are supervised. You know, we're right there with them. We're really kind of making sure they don't get too dizzy and fall off. We find a very comfortable part with them. But then a lot of people can come in and either their pre-visit with me specifically, their post-visit. Of course, we do some things directly, especially when we're doing a lot of upregulation laser on them, but they can laser themselves pre-seeing me. They could laser or spin themselves pre the treatment. They can spin themselves post. And then our home sales have been great because people are like, well, I want one of my own. And I always want people to heal when they're not in front of me. So because when you do start looking at PubMed and you start seeing, do they have a cardiovascular problem? Do they have a mental emotional problem? Do they have digestive problems? Do they have balance issues? It is so broad based what the vestibular system does. It is their neurological capacity starts improving. It's just stress doesn't affect them the same.
Well, that makes sense. I think a lot of these sort of things as well, you use your expertise and knowledge as a doctor and practitioner, and you use the modalities that you've got at your disposal, but there's so much that the general public and consumers could do more when they get home with their own lifestyle changes to try to speed up the whole process.
Yeah, and one of the things, you know, if people do these things, and like I said, you know, these can get sold to people in Europe and other parts of the world, even though, you know, it's professional figure skaters and professional ballet that owns the company, and I'm just working with them and primarily started it in the US, but we definitely like their figure skating platforms. I mean, they're sold all through Europe. That's where they started, you know, so there's thousands of the non-clinical versions in Europe and other areas because it's just the standard of that industry. But as we look at these types of things, it is so safe and so effective. And when I'm measuring physiology, so we'll even use pulse oximeters on people's figures, and it's really nice. They have remote ones now, so you, the doctor, could be watching it on your phone, and you know whether they got the wristband ones or pulse oximeters on each finger. There could be a difference. All these things mean different things, like in the neurodiplomate program, for instance. So it is neat to see when you just put people on a spinner, even if they're not having symptom like the butterflies in their stomach or they're about to fall off and lose their balance. It's pretty interesting to see heart rate changes, which again, this is sympathetic, parasympathetic. And it's really neat to document. It's like, okay, you're spinning at 16% or you're spinning at 20%. And you look, it's like, wow, your heart rate went up 18 points. You know, they're like, I don't feel anything. And it's like, but you have that conclusive data. And so I like to challenge people just to have that physiological changes to where we are challenging their nervous system, just by doing the spinner. But again, you're upregulating so many things you don't even know of when you're lasering people while they're spinning, whether the laser's just in a stand or people do get to the point they can just kind of hold it on their head when they're spinning in a chair. I kind of like to have their hands free, so they're doing all sorts of other activations and complexing their body while they're spinning. And the more you complex, the lower their score gets. It's challenging to the body. So the more in shape their vestibular system gets, all of a sudden they can spin faster and their heart rate doesn't go up as much. You know, people will commonly start breaking out in a sweat. You know, we definitely never push people to the point they get nauseous. They may have a little butterflies in their stomach. And it is amazing how weak people's vestibular system is. I mean, it is pathological weak 30 years before they ever even consider losing independence of activities of daily living. So that to me at our clinic is always the minimum goal from day one. We tell people it's like you're 20 years old and you're an unhealthy 45-year-old biologically, you know, or vice versa, you know. So we're very honest with people. You're not going to make it, you know, based upon your scores now at your age. And that's not with
you've got a right that you've got to be like that with them, have you? Because, you know, sometimes it's not going to be good news, but some people get in the comfort zone and they sometimes need a little bit of a shake to get their life in order. There's quite a large question here, Jerome. Tilt ankle foot boards, vibroplates using a spinning chair versus spinning plate. I guess stimulation of vestibular system more so. Where do you get the spin plates from? How long do you laser for to start with the general public? How do you increase the time and movements? I can repeat that if you want it.
All great questions. So obviously the person already has a lot of experience. You know, we want you to do everything you're already doing. This is not a substitute for a vibe plate. This is not a substitute for a slant board. You know, you want to change those body positions. And there's so many valuable things out there already. We just are allowed to integrate these types of things. So, you know, first, a person gets a lot of ideas. It's like, oh my gosh, like you can put a slant board on this and change foot positions even while you spin. We do it all the time right now. We set that on a vibe plate with a slant board per se. And so now we've got vibration while the feet are doing different things. So yeah, we're always marching in place. So yeah, whoever asked that, great question. Again, how long, you know, are you going to laser just for upregulation purposes? And maybe you're like, well, it's not very practical. I don't want to laser people while they're doing it. So, you know, you give people a little break and then you just laser in between. And this acts as that upregulation that many people do. You fire a stimulus, you take a break and you laser while the person's passive, but you get that activation benefit in the body if you laser within 20 seconds. Even if you do a longer laser period. So,
but if you can, though, you'd be better doing the lasering while they're on the.
Yeah, and you know, we do that all the time. It's getting a little ahead of the curve. You know, there's some things I do want to do to formally integrate, you know, lasers, especially on the chair. But it's not there right now, but it doesn't take away the huge benefits that are there and available. But yeah, when you're already doing different body positions, you know, using vibe plates, using slant boards, using wobble boards, using AirX balance pads, all of those are great. And I would say, don't ever stop using those. Like, this is not a substitute for those things, but you will find out this is an immense difference maker, and none of those are a substitute for these either. And then from a therapeutic dose, you know, you just kind of want to increase your time. You can't push people past, you know, a certain point because they will throw up. I mean, they will you will exhaust the nervous system, especially when you're working with fairly sick people. So I'm not fragile to people. I'm known as a very aggressive practitioner, but I know when is when. And, you know, I'm always like, there's no reason to push you so hard today that I could not work on you tomorrow, even if I'm not seeing you tomorrow, you know, especially early on in care. And, you know, so it's a little bit of common sense. And if you are used to working with people such as any personal training background, or just treat others like you'd like to be treated and get some personal experience on it, some people just start super slow. That's all I could say. You never have any idea. I even have one guy, he's a professional motocross racer. And he's still to this day a very high level competitive invite for mountain bike racing. He's got mad skills, and what he can do on a motorcycle and a mountain bike is amazing. Like, he can do wheelies for 300 yards and eat a sandwich at the same time. Like, that's no exaggeration. You know, he can do all the BMX hopping. He sucks at spinning on these things, which is really unique. But he looks at how good he is doing some of those athletic events he competed in, and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm 42 years old. Obviously, he can't race and do things like he used to. He's still a very high level mountain bike rider, but he's like, look how bad I am on this. Like, think how much better I will be long term in the things he really enjoys athletically. Because he has flown over the handlebars who knows how many times, how many head injuries. I mean, the amounts of plates and screws in his body, you know, but he's super fit and active. But he knows he's got to keep working on his health. And even though he's got tons and tons of positives, he was really amazed how he felt, and I would agree with him, how lagging his spinning was compared to how talented he still is on a motorcycle and mountain bike. But it's just a weak link. And he's like, wow, think of how much better I could be, not to mention think how I'm going to extend my career and my quality of life by doing this. So I didn't even have to tell him those things. He just got it.
Yeah. Good. No, it's nice to hear. What is the reset? Is it checking for cranial nerve test deficiencies and then lasering by stimulation whilst performing tests?
You can. So if you're a muscle tester, you're generally going to identify the weak link. So even if you start with a strong arm, no matter where you move the eyes or no matter how you challenge the ear, a strong muscle is going to remain strong unless it's dysfunctional, not pathological, just dysfunctional. And then, you move your eyes at a certain position, no matter what muscle you're testing will go weak. And then you can stop the stimulus. And especially, I highly recommend the first time you're introducing laser to a person, whether you find a weak myotome or you are doing more advanced muscle testing to where they're involved in it, they can feel their muscle go weak when you have them do a certain challenge. Don't do anything. Laser them within that 20-second window start. And then you're getting that activation process, and then go back immediately, muscle test them to exactly what made it weak. And there's no difference except the patient knows invariably it was the laser. So initially when we have people, reset cranial nerves or like myotomes, I don't have them keep moving it while I laser it, because I don't want them to think they can't feel the laser, but they're like, oh, all I have to do is go to the gym and weak things turn on. Look at it through the eyes of a patient. So lasers can work better through activation and even active activation, but like right at the beginning, we identify the weakness, we pause, we treat with the laser when they're doing nothing. They're just at a neutral position, and then immediately go back and retest. So there's no smoke and mirrors. There's nothing. The patients can feel that change, and they know 100% it was the laser and the laser only. Nothing else did it. And then you can start complexing, things and moving a little faster and doing things consistently while lasering.
Cool. One of our long-standing customers, unfortunately, was running late and only made it on for the last 15 minutes. She's asking, how do you laser them whilst they're spinning?
Yeah.
We have a vertical stand, which we have for the laser. I'm presuming that would be a pretty good idea, where you just point the laser beams vertically as they're actually spinning around.
Yeah. At the very beginning on one of the opening slides, or even, let's see, you'll probably see it here. If I go back to, I don't know if you can see my slides right now in the background or not.
Yes.
I could, so like here, you kind of see, what Simon was just referring to. I call it the rotisserie chicken. So, we use the Erchonia, and I don't know if you can see that, or if I have to share my screen, but, this is one way, when you're sitting in the chair, patients can hold on to the laser beams and laser their own brain. That way it works super great. I don't know if it will get done. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but yet, you got to get engineers and all sorts of things involved in these things. So ultimately, I would like to have on the chair version to where there's like little Martian antennas, and we get to hook the Erchonia laser up to it. So everybody can be doing things, training their hands. They can do rubber band exercises, grip training. We have balls that are half filled with water and they slosh. So there's so much neurology and posture muscles that they do. And we do all of our patients, our goal is to get them, they can hold on to the balance bar, but we want everybody to do a one-legged squat on the standing spinner. And if you're in the chair, there's nothing wrong with it, but we want you to get healthy enough that you don't use the chair anymore. You just use the chair as a warm-up, and then you go to the standing spinner, and you march in place, you stand on one leg, you try to hold on less and less, you start doing squats, maybe even start doing some things to where you don't hold on to the balance bar at certain RPMs. And we challenge them. You will never run out of things to do in our office. If you've won 10 gold medals, our goal for you is to win 11 gold medals.
Oh, definitely. What about the connection of the insular lobe with the vestibular system?
Here again, people can get as detailed as possible. I'm not being mean when I say this. I don't deep dive into all the neurology because they don't get the results that coaches and strength coaches do. So it reaches a point, when you just pull up the health of the body and you even do different positions. we have wrestlers and jujitsu people, they take the balance bar off, or if they're not that big, you could do it with the balance bar on off, but they're in a guard position, so they're face up. And, people do sit-ups on these things all the time. They do one-legged squats all the time on these things. They do levers. If you've ever done dance or ballet, everybody knows what a lever is. And, that's kind of the goal of these things. And then I loved that one video I shared with you where the little girl had like a very light medicine ball, just doing gentle exercises with it. We have like, they're not metal kettlebells, they're sand-filled kettlebells. And it's like, yeah, that way when you clunk yourself, you're not going to hurt yourself. But yeah, all sorts of different posture aspects. So how does it work within a certain part of the brain? I don't know. Ask a figure skater that could do 300 revolutions per minute and they don't care. I'm not saying as a clinician you don't care, but yeah, that's beyond my academic level of what's it going to do for me. So I'm more of the coach type of person, but that's a good question. It really is. I'm just not the person to answer that for you.
Okay, no problem. This is from Nell again, who was late on. If you were to choose one, would it be standing or sitting spinner for most of the general public, not professional athletes?
Yeah. I think you have to look at your existing practice. And I think the chair is going to be a home run for so many clinicians, because there's a lot of frail people out there, people that do come with head injuries, no matter what age there is. They've got some pretty serious traumas in rehab. So, if you don't have a lot of people that need assistance, or they walk in with the cane, or they're just really slow, maybe then you're like, I have only 20% of those people, and we'll do more of the face up, face down. There's still so many things you can do in your office to help them. But I think if you just look at your clinic now, like how frail are your clients, it would kind of answer that for you. Cool. Which one would serve the biggest population that's in your practice?
Yeah, definitely. It's more of a laser on this one. Why is visible light uniquely suited to supporting brain health compared to the likes of red light therapy?
Well, so that I may reword that a little bit. So infrared is invisible. Red light therapy is technically not infrared. So red light therapy is still in the visible light range. It's just light emitting diodes. Okay, so if you can see it, it's not an infrared, no matter what color it is, whether it's red, violet, blue, green. Okay, so if you can see it, it's not an infrared. But infrared wavelength is invisible. Nobody can see it unless you're an X-man or an X-woman, or you're a superhero of sorts and you got X-ray vision. But that's at 761 nanometers. So at 761 nanometers, it is not a true laser. It is not a light emitting diode. It's an infrared. And you could call it an infrared laser if you want, but you can't call it a true laser. It's an infrared, and it's invisible. You cannot see it. So the visible light spectrum is from 390 to 760. And red light therapy, they want to piggyback off of all of the value that company, specifically Erchonia, is the one who created the light therapy boom in the world, even though they are a true laser company. So there is a difference between red light therapy, because it's an LED, versus lasers. There was research papers we taught. I mean, those were out 20, 25 years ago that Erchonia did not do the study, but different universities and research publishers, they took LEDs versus lasers of the same color spectrum and basically the same wavelength. And lasers would get a 30% increase in tissue regeneration, and the LEDs would get 3%. So it's not like LEDs don't work at all, but they're nothing compared to a laser. And then when you start getting into wavelengths, and I know you guys, Simon, provide a lot of people that talk about that. The shorter the wavelength, even with Erchonia lasers, the shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy per photon. And it's not a little, it's a lot. It has nothing to do with the battery. So that is the advantage. When you start using infrared wavelengths, 761 nanometers and above, they're very long wavelengths. They have very, very, very low energy per photon. And a photon binds to a photon receptor and it gives its energy off, and then it goes through the electron transport system and makes ATP. Long wavelengths are very, very efficient at delivering energy. LEDs are much, much less efficient because of all the properties of an LED versus a true laser, and ultimately how that gets into the cell. They are also much more inefficient, to where, you know, studies done 20 years ago, they proved that, you know, an LED gets 3% acceleration of tissue regeneration under the exact same environment and study conditions that a true laser got 30-35%.
I think a lot of systems are just LED, but I'm sure there's some across here that mix LED with infrared in the same platform.
Well, yeah, LEDs and infrared, there are so few, like, you just don't know, because Erchonia is a true medical grade manufacturing company. So they don't have a GMP. So even, you know, everybody claims we're the best and we're better than Erchonia. And it's like, okay, prove it. And, you know, I'm not saying they don't work at all, and case studies have value, but, you know, they're not level 1A random site double blind clinical trials. Like Erchonia is the only company that even has any of the guts to put their products in a random site double blind clinical trial. And that's the only study they've ever done since day one. So when you look at those types of things, it's just pretty clear. Most people don't have any research at all. They have a totally different FDA clearance that was piggybacked off of the 1976 heat lamp. It's just for topical heating. If you ask them, wow, that's great, you're the latest and greatest, show me your 510K clearance. And if you ask any company, show me 510K clearance, most of them will have no idea what you're talking about. And at that point, you know exactly they're full of crap, because that is the most basic question you could ask anybody who does know what they're talking about. And, you know, if they do know what a 510K clearance is, like at least 95% of them, and I don't even know who the other 5% are, but it's going to say topical heating. And it's from that 1976 carryover to a heat lamp, not an infrared laser, not an LED light therapy, but they piggybacked off it because they don't do any research. And anybody on this call can create your own device. You can download a form online. It's called the substantial equivalency. Anybody can download that form, send it into the FDA, and you can make a flashlight in your bathtub that will have a certain rating of a certain battery output, and you will automatically get that 510K NHN FDA clearance for topical heating.
I think, Jerome, it's just Europe has been so lackadaisical in the past when it comes to regulatory clearances, and there's a lot of false marketing statements made. And as you said, you know, I mean, one thing I've tried to train the team to do is, even though Europe doesn't have to go by the US FDA, it's a stamp of credibility, but it's also understanding what type of FDA clearance, whether it's a level 1 510K or whether it's just an appearance only. Or whether it's a substantial equivalent compared to a previous generation technology. There's a sort of brain-based TBI or TMI type system that we have over here, and it was a substantial equivalent to a 2014 TMS system, and I think it only got an 8% better response than the sham. But for those who don't look too closely into the clearances, they probably wouldn't get that far in to ask those questions. They would just take the clearance and think it was something better than what it actually is.
Yeah. So, you know, you made a great point with that. You know, people do need to be aware of it. The one thing is, you know, Erchonia and yourself, you do such an amazing job. You're such an educator. There's a lot of transparency. Like, they're very proud. Yet I'm just a practicing clinician, even though I've done a lot of work with Erchonia over the years. I don't work for Erchonia. I just decide to associate my name with them because I guess at one time I was probably in the right place at the right time. I mean, I really saw an aha moment what this could do, and nobody had any idea what these things were. And it just made sense to me. And we didn't have any idea. I was an AK person, a muscle tester. There was the 5 factors of the IVF and how you would always look for dysfunction. And again, being a strength coach, there was other strength and flexibility imbalances. You would look for people, that was very, very different than AK. So, as you're trying to correct these things and you're like, wow, this isn't one of the 5 factors of the IVF. We don't stretch, we don't strengthen to be that you can't. But it was like, this is amazing. You could take a laser and at least have 6 factors of the IVF, from what AK was talking about. So it was kind of neat. And nobody had any idea at that time how photons bind to photon receptors, and different wavelengths had different energies. We only just had red at that time for years. I am a history book. It is truly amazing from where this started and all the different layers that I've seen. Basically they're close from, I was not there at day one, but the products just really hadn't changed at all from the time I came along. It was one single diode, one frequency you could program in, and it was like that for at least a year.
Yeah. Everybody's got to start somewhere. And a lot of stories you hear, they started in their father's garage. And started messing around with lasers.
Even with that people would go, wow, look how old this is. Like, that was game changing. Nothing like that existed before. And so even being a great chiropractor, ninja adjusters, all the nutrition supplements, put on the tongue, all the emotional release, all those things, you still had cases of things that you could not get a change in the muscle test or the indicator. You would just laser it. It would just be like, and you're like, whoa, that's amazing. I wonder how that works. You just knew it did work, but it was just the perfect team between us very open-minded, dynamic clinicians. And Erchonia started doing very traditional research very, very early on. And they just took, a portion of the money that they made and they put it in a savings account, because they're like, there's really something here that's amazing, but we're going to have to do research to validate this by the powers that be and not just get great clinical results. So that was them. That had nothing to do with any of us clinicians that existed at that time. We were just always identify it, find it, fix it, and teach those things. And Erchonia was doing.
You need people to understand how to integrate it into everyday practice, which is, I think, is where the likes of yourself actually came in to show, how easily that's possible. I don't want too many more. There's a couple of more questions, but I know everybody's probably running out of time. Can balance training influence stress response and vagal tone? And if so, how does that show up clinically?
100%. So we kind of made light of that already. So how are you going to decide to do it? One thing, so it's measurable numbers. Pulse oximeters are cheap, and especially the ones that are remote, to a phone, there's no cord on them. So, and you'll see those things. So immediately you will see heart rate changes and how it even matches with somebody's symptoms. Once they start getting butterflies in their stomach, or if they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm losing it. We don't want to put people in an uncomfortable place, but pulse rate, heart rate, even if, you're not doing blood pressure in those dynamic moments, but there's probably cuffs out there that definitely would do it. So the cardiovascular system is incredibly sensitive. And when the body, are not actually moving, your body is just adapting to this movement. Oh, it is very sympathetic, parasympathetic, and it is very, very calculated numbers to achieve doing those. And then even just from, maybe a strength coach today, because heart rate variability is so easy, between all the Aura rings, the watches, all of that. It's very simple data analytics. But years ago, before those things were so prevalent, people would just go, you're spinning this fast, how many reps can you do, and how would you rate your symptoms? Or you would even have, some performance difference after that. So I have like a half chair rail in my clinic, and it's like 14 feet long. So that's what we do the walk a straight line test on. So if we turn it one way, it's flat, even though the top is slightly oval. But that if you turn it upside down for more advanced people, that's slightly oval bottom and the top is flat, but it's a little harder. So, we score people on these things. We do all sorts of scoring. Again, I'm a strength coach. That's your job, is where do we need to take you? And we just modify those things for clinical purposes. But yeah, when you spin people and you try to make them walk a standard straight line, but there's got to be consequences, you put them on that half chair rail and they just fall off. They're terrible at it, even when they're not very dizzy. It just stresses the nervous system. So how you get your data, how fast you're spinning, how long can you spin before you break out in a gentle sweat, once you stop, how's the rube spinning, but heart rate variability is epic, and it's so reproducible. It's got nothing to do with anybody's perception.
Cool, thank you. We'll make this the last one. Have you observed improvements in coordination, confidence, or emotional regulation in patients? And what do those changes usually look like?
Yeah, I do a lot of mental, emotional work on people. And like I said, a big gut brain, we take a lot of people with serious depression, suicidal tendencies, and we just rebuild them. We balance their physiology. And prior to this, and kind of looking deeper into this, I never would have done balance training for the people that came to me for the neuro release techniques, as well as the gut brain physiology and type of things that we do to restore the chemistry part of it. But now we do. And yeah, it's just right in PubMed. I mean, when it talks about all these different conditions, and the vestibular system is completely integrated into it, it's also just on thresholds. And if you've been victimized, I mean, there is a reason for counseling. There is a reason for the neuro emotional release techniques and all the different mental health aspects, but never underestimate the power of your general physical preparedness, your physical capacity, which is also neurological capacity. Doctors like to use neuroplasticity. Strength coaches are more into neural drive. It doesn't really matter, but they all mean slightly different things. But when you can improve, that's why people train so hard, like in special forces. People are trying to kill you. Okay, and your training is brutal, because when people are shooting bullets at you, you will get desensitized to it. It won't stress you out at all after a period of time. And that's the whole purpose of what we're doing. When you can up-regulate the body, and even using these, you are so far. I mean, you could become pretty phenomenal. You could take the balance bar off and start doing more advanced work. But like I said, if I get any patient to hold on to the balance bar and do a one-legged squat, that is 10 times above your average successful patient, let alone doing what the novice figure skater or gymnast is going to do on here. And we're talking the novice ones. You're just starting to scratch the surface if that's what you can do.
Brilliant. Look, one of the biggest things I love about you, your answers are so thorough and very interesting. Hopefully everybody out there agreed, and they enjoyed it just as much as I did. Any information specific to that, I'm sure you wouldn't mind. We'll put people directly in contact with you, Jerome.
No, absolutely. If I don't get to it right away, I do have 2 clinics, and I'm back and forth. But this is always really important. The doctor is helping you guys. I can only work on, 1 to 4 people at a time at the same time in space, where, if you guys get the answers and you're comfortable, that information is helping 100 people, 1,000 people at the same time. And so it has been incredible, the influence Erchonia has had. And, you're a huge part of that, Simon, in terms of, look at all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of clinicians you've influenced, where we weren't doing any of that until you came along, and you're passing on this information and helping people like you are as well. That every individual out there that is doing this, you guys are great. It's amazing the effects everybody on this call has created.
No, we appreciate that. I think as doctors or practitioners as well, the biggest thing we can give to our clients, and this has nothing to do with sales, it's about being open-minded. It's about being aware of what's out there, and whether you purchase something or not is immaterial. Just be aware of it. Your patients deserve you to know and be educated about every aspect of everything. And that's what we try to do through providing factual data. So if you're going to make a decision, whatever that is, base it on fact rather than on fiction. And that's what we always try to do. So I presume Kate's going to get a PDF, Jerome, of this presentation.
Yeah, we absolutely can do that. Yes.
Cool. And we'll send that to everybody. Also, everybody will receive their recording of this if they'd like to go over it again. Any more questions that come up, feel free to message myself for those of you that have my number, or Kate or any of the Erchonia team. So guys, enjoy the rest of your evening. Jerome, can't thank you enough again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
I will. Okay,
And,
everybody have a
yeah,
great rest of your day. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for spending this time with us.
hopefully it won't be like the Wizard of Oz and your house won't fly away somewhere over the rainbow.
Yeah, it should. It's a very nice day outside. I might
Brilliant.
try to.
Thanks a lot, Jerome. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.